Alright folks, welcome to Premium Fuel Magazine. Today we are going to be working on the rear subframe for the V8 Miata project. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to mount this Ford 8.8 independent rear out of a T-Bird. It's actually a very similar rear to what's in the Cobra. I think they're interchangeable, but anyways, we're going to be mounting this rear into the rear subframe for the Miata. And basically, in order to make that happen, we need to create some new mounts for it. So the way that the normal Miata rear diff mounts in there is, you see these two structures here. There's like two big old wings that come off of the diff, and they basically bolt in there. There's absolutely no provisions on this thing to mount a differential, so we have to actually build them. So this is actually a common modification that's been done, and if you're watching this video, you've probably seen other versions of what people do. So I'm not going to get super into detail. I'm just going to kind of show you some of the key aspects of what I'm doing here. Basically, underneath the front of the diff, I'm going to build two little platforms that the front mounts are going to mount to. I actually saved the front bushings, which you'll see a little bit later, and I'm not 100% sure what I want to do around back. I did actually save the mounting point, or whatever you call it, the mount, off of the T-Bird, because I figured it would come in handy for me to use. So I don't know if I'm going to end up cutting this or actually trying to just bolt directly to it. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll work that out after we get the front all set. As far as materials goes, we've got some all thread here, several nuts that match that all thread. We've got whatever gauge this is, angle iron. We've got like a 1-inch box tube. We've got a 2-inch box tube, and we've got this flat stock or flat bar, whatever you call this stuff. So basically, between these materials, my angle grinder, and that Harbor Freight welder right there, we're going to mount this diff into the subframe. All right, the first thing we're going to be doing is forming the front mounts for the front of the diff. We're going to be using this 2x2 box tubing and this flat stock that we've got right here. And I'm going to be loosely following the plans that I found on v8miata.blogspot.com. So we're going to be sort of following his plans. And then as far as the rear goes, we're just going to kind of wing it once we get to that point. Alright, so we've got the front section of the diff all mounted up, and honestly, this came out way better than I expected. It's pretty much perfect. So, in a little bit, I'm going to trim these down just so they're a little bit shorter, because this is going to be hanging down underneath the car, and it doesn't need the potential of being snagged anywhere. So, we're going to cut these down a little bit, and as for the rear of the section, like I was saying earlier, I really would like to reuse this thing right here, mostly just because I don't like drilling holes, but the way this is lining up, it pretty much looks perfect with this 2-inch square tube underneath it. So I think what I'm just going to end up doing is just going straight across the frame right there, right where you see this tube laying, and going to build some kind of attachment to the factory mount here, and basically all of this stuff back here is going to end up getting chopped off and deleted. And really would like to reuse this metal once again, just because it's got holes in it already. But this rubber bushing material in here it's just going to be a mess trying to clean that out. It's not going to be worth the effort. I'd rather drill holes than try to reuse this thing. I think also when I go ahead and chop this this bushing part of the mount off right here, I'm also going to go ahead and weld that together just to help gusset that up and strengthen that mount. Doesn't really need it, but I'm just going to go ahead and do that just to make everything more solid. I really don't want to unbolt things from here, just because thinking about future installs and uninstalls, it's going to be harder for me to try to basically slide this in and out of here and put these bolts in than it would be for me to just have 4 vertical bolts going in and out of this thing. So what I'm going to end up doing is drilling through the frame here and putting 4 bolts through, just like what you see here. It's just going to be a little bit more of a simple process, and that's just thinking ahead. I could absolutely attach this thing quickly and easily, but I'm just trying to think ahead and make the most ergonomic design that I can, just thinking about future installs and uninstalls. And the last thing I wanted to point out, we've got a couple of features here. You probably can't see it on the video just because this thing is so dirty, but there's a little hump here, and the same thing on the other side. And the front actually had the same thing, which makes this not flat. I'm just gonna take, maybe you can see it from this angle a little bit. Yeah, you guys can't really see it, but anyways, there's definitely a hump here, and I'm just gonna hammer that in with the hammer, flatten everything out. It's not that hard to do, just takes a couple of whacks, and that way I'll have a nice flat surface to weld on. So, we're gonna go ahead and get to chopping. Alright guys, not quite sure where I left off just now, but it's been about 3-4 weeks. I took a break from this thing, but here's the current progress. So I started working on my mount for the rear, and that's basically how it's shaping up right now. Let's jump to the front for a second. First of all, I'm really lucky that this worked out the way that it did. I really should have mocked this up and tacked this together a lot more times than I did, but I pretty much mocked it up, bolted it all together, and then welded it down all at once. And that potentially could have been a recipe for disaster, because the fitment on this thing has to be pretty dead on, and I just lucked up that it fits so well. It's off by about maybe 2 millimeters, which makes a really annoying fitment for these bushings, but it does fit as it is. Just like I said, I'm really lucky that it actually worked out the way that it did, so that's good. I should not have made studs for right here. I should have taken a little bit more time and actually made those bolts so that I could remove these, because if these guys ever get damaged for any reason, it's going to be really hard to repair that. But they shouldn't get damaged, and you know, I shouldn't have to work on it, but we'll see how that works out. So knowing that going forward, I wanted to do it the proper way in the rear and have bolts that I could actually remove, and I partially worked on that, and I messed up on it a little bit, and so this is basically where I am right now, and I think I'm actually going to go in a little bit different direction with this. So basically I think what I'm going to do is basically cut all of this straight off and build a piece coming off of here. That way I can use angle iron going across here that will actually brace the subframe a little bit, because this is really like a paper thin subframe. This is not super strong in my opinion, but the subframe is going to need some bracing, so I'll be able to add the bracing in as well as adding in the support that I need for the rear of the diff. So we're going to go ahead, pull the diff out, put that up on the bench, and start cutting and mocking. I also got a new welder during the middle of the process. I absolutely still 100% advocate for you guys getting the Harbor Freight welder. The reason I picked this up is because we're going to be doing the roll cage, and I don't want Harbor Freight BBs all over my roll cage, and that's where the limitations of this thing are basically reached. It's a great welder, but it's a little bit messy, and I just don't want my roll cage looking super amateur. So I went ahead and got the real deal. This is still a Harbor Freight welder. I'm getting used to it, but this should do the job. So let's go ahead and get back to work. Alright folks, here's the finished product. I'm really happy with the way things came out. So just an overview of what we did. We created two pedestals up here in the front for the front diff mount, and I'm gonna have a link down in the description with the website that I got the rough measurements from in order to make that happen. So that's what my front looks like. That's how it looks from the top. The back is basically my design, and it's pretty simple. We just chopped off the old T-bird mount. We created a bracing right here. We created another bracing or mount point right here, which I was planning on mounting it to, and it didn't work out. But I think what we came up with was a lot better. And we've got it held on by two bolts here in the back. So we're gonna pull this thing apart one more time, and we're actually gonna change out the gear ratio inside the diff, and then this whole unit will be ready to put inside the car. Still waiting on axles. So next time you see this unit, we'll be throwing it in the Miata. That's about it, folks. We'll catch you on the next one.